This is the Citizen of Heaven podcast, Terry Francis Part 2. I am Hal Hammonds, and I am a citizen of heaven, and I am your embedded correspondent in Satan's world. I bring you this message of hope today from Pensacola, Florida. This is report number 38, dated December 24th, in the year of our Lord 2019. I bid God's grace and peace to all my fellow sojourners here in this earthly plane. I remain sound in body, alert in mind, and energized in spirit. Recently, I got to sit down with Terry Francis, who preaches for the Chelsea Church of Christ in the Birmingham, Alabama area. I've been hearing the good work Terry does in cooperation with Philip Martin on the popular Do the Work podcast. If you're on Facebook, look it up. It'll give you some excellent insight into the work of an evangelist, helpful for preachers and non-preachers alike. In the I've Been Playing segment, we will discuss Terry's lifelong obsession with the football program at the University of Tennessee. He's had a rough go of things in recent years, but that's what being a fan is all about. Sticking out through the good times and the bad times. Are you ready? Here we go. This is what I've been hearing.
So, Do the Work is Phil, everybody calls him Philip. I call him Phil. Mm-hmm. Phil and I went to college together many moons ago. And so we went to college together in Florida, and then we were also in Bowling Green at the same time. And we kind of drifted apart. And about a year and a half to 2 years ago, Phil was looking for a place to preach. And about the time he found out, and he and I talked about a place I had a connection to, and that's where he ended up at. And about the time that he was done, I was looking, and he had all these notes on all these places. And what really started that, though, was not only that, our boys went to camp together, and our boys became friends. And so we started, quite frankly, making fun of our boys. They were doing some online music where his son was laying down the tracks, and my son decided he was a rapper for a period of time. And his name was Payday. That was his rapper name, by the way. We still make fun of Payday. His big hit was Hey Now What You Doing, which is awful. And me and Phil would mock our boys about how they thought they were fantastic, and we had heard better stuff that had never made it. And so anyways, that reconnected us, and we both moved to new places, and we kept talking. And one day Phil says to me, he says, "Hey, have you thought about," he says, "I'm thinking about doing a thing, and I think you would be great to join me. I want to do a Facebook page." And that's how it started off. We're just focused on the work of the preacher. And I was like, well, what's that going to look like? And we're going to Facebook Live that. And so every Tuesday at 11 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Central, we say 30 minutes, but it's usually 45.
I'm aware of how long it is.
And if you add a third person, it just gets worse.
One might say better.
Well, maybe. We feel really guilty about that, but it's hard to cut things off. After all, you keep adding preachers to the mix, it just gets exponentially longer. So we decided we'd do this weekly broadcast through Facebook. Since then, we have started downloading them to YouTube. And then recently, and Phil's all the technical aspects of this. I can barely turn the system on when he's not around. He's overseas. He was in Jordan this week, so he didn't join us. Edwin Crozier did. I barely survived without Phil, but he's the one that puts it on YouTube. And then now I believe we're podcasting those. It may be one of those things where he does like 3 or 4 at a time, but they're available. It's called Do the Work. It's been beneficial. There's a part of that I think that's therapeutic to me and Phil to open up about things that have happened to us. One of the recent broadcasts we did that you and I talked about at lunch today, where we talked about kind of this time period where we didn't talk to each other. And that was kind of a difficult time period in the church as well, and how that affected all of us. And so we talked about that, and that was therapeutic for us to have that conversation. Some of the things we talked about in that we had not talked about to each other, and so you kind of got a glimpse into that very real conversation at the time. So other things we've covered, and we just started. We'll do several episodes on the work and characteristics of elders and how to appoint elders. And some of that's been influenced by our experiences as well, but also our study. And one of the interesting things about that I find interesting is Phil and I don't always agree on everything. And so sometimes you see us say, here's how I view this and here's how I view this. I think most of the time we agree on most stuff. We sometimes get to things a little differently. And we're very different. Phil's got a different approach to his work and to his preaching than I do. So we bring kind of an aspect of that from kind of two different cultures and backgrounds. And I will say this, I really appreciate the relationship I've been allowed to build with Phil through this work and to reconnect. And I think we are much better friends today than we were even in college, and I really appreciate that. I will say there's two purposes of this, maybe three. One of those was to explain to brethren what the work actually looks like. I don't know. Like, we have an episode coming up, we're going to plan on doing like a day in the life of the preacher. I don't know that most members understand that. I don't know how about you, but I've been asked a lot of times, well, what do you do?
Right.
You just sit around and read books all day? And, there's a part of that where we read. It's a little bit more intense than just sitting around and reading books. It makes it sound like we're reading Dr. Seuss all day long.
Right.
And
now you got the other folks, though, who assume that you're sitting around playing golf all day.
yes, yeah.
So it could be worse.
Right, could be worse. So you've got those two extremes, and there's that crowd that thinks you're only working 4 hours a week. And by the way, those people, I always jokingly say you're just jealous that you picked a job you have to work 40 hours. But we want to expose people to here's what the work actually is. Here's different aspects of the work you don't think of. Secondly, we wanted a better look at godly leadership, and Phil's actually now both an evangelist and an elder at the church there in Georgia where he's at. And that gives us a different aspect. That's actually happened since we began this work together of Do the Work, which is really beneficial. He sees things from both sides of that issue. But we wanted to have an opportunity to talk about biblical leadership, how that interacts. And when leadership, I really mean elders, evangelists, and deacons total. Not everybody's comfortable with that. What does that look like biblically? What is that? How do they work together? How should elders, especially elders and evangelists, get along? How should they communicate? What's their relationship look like? The third thing that we wanted to do was kind of in regards to young preachers. For a long time, I've kind of had a special interest in young preachers. I've done several different young preachers workshops that I've hosted where we invite guys that have only been preaching 5 years or less, and we have a pretty intense 2-day discussion of what the work looks like. And by the way, that's not a Bible study. It is, hey, here's how you write a sermon. Here's how you avoid proof texting. Here's how you counsel a grieving family. Here's how you work at a church without elders. Here's how you work with a church with elders. Here's how you approach race within a congregation. All those kind of practical things. We did one on interviewing. We had a guy come in and do a mock interview, and we talked about what that looked like. So I've had that kind of thing. Well, in regards to Do the Work, two things. First off, what we've learned is I think there's a lot of young guys that don't understand what the work looks like fully when they get into it. They kind of have a romanticized version of that. So we want to pull back and kind of show them, hey, here's what this is. But there's also a side of this where we want to protect the next generation of preachers. I am convinced we've done a really bad job of recruiting evangelists for the church. We tell our best and brightest, go get a degree, get a really high-paying job so you can financially support the church.
Right.
That's really what we do. We don't do it in so many words. I'm hoping that the process of this, of kind of being open and honest, that we kind of protect some of those younger guys from some of the ways maybe that we've been mistreated in the past by members, by leadership, by other preachers, by everybody, in other words. But also in the process would recruit some of the smarter, more intelligent, more promising young minds in the church today to do this work, because it is a needed work. There there are not enough preachers. There, and you know this, there are empty pulpits all over our country and all over the world, that there's not enough preachers to do this work. And I don't think this generation of the millennials and lower, I don't think we've done a good job of promoting that work to them. Mm-hmm. My generation, I don't know about you, but I felt I had people talk to me before I finally decided to do that about doing it. And I had people try to get me to do that before I finally made that commitment. And I made that commitment after my junior year of college, which would have been my senior year had I not dropped out to figure out what I wanted to do. And when I made that decision, and I made the decision not to go back to school to get a degree at that point that I never planned on using, I had people tell me, even family members, you will never amount to anything without a 4-year degree. Mm-hmm. And that was very discouraging for me. And I'm afraid we are even more discouraging towards preachers today. And this isn't about, I think 4-year degrees are great. My son, I've encouraged him to do that. But I'm just saying that even then there was this, and I don't know if you ever heard this, but it's, well, what if you get fired? What's your backup plan?
Right.
And I would say, well, what about the doctor? What if he gets a malpractice suit? What's his backup plan? They have none. This was the one work I saw that we had this idea that you had to have a backup plan. Nobody else does that. And by the way, I had a backup plan. I had welded, and at the time I started preaching, if I got fired, I could actually go make about $14,000 a year more welding at the old company I was with than I could have preaching. So I had a backup plan, but it wasn't a 4-year degree backup plan.
Right.
And we all know my generation was also a generation we started really looking down on skilled trades. And now all of a sudden we're starting to reemphasize skilled trades,
right.
Which is pretty interesting. So from that aspect, this is hopefully encouraging guys to preach, hopefully protecting guys who are already preaching, hopefully informing members and everybody in the church. Here's the challenges of preaching. Here's the things we worry about. We did one on depression, and I think a lot of people had no clue about preachers and depression. We know about that. Yeah. We know about the depression. We know about the alarming trend in the last year and a half of, quote, pastors in the religious world killing themselves from depression. And all of us, we've faced that in our lives, no doubt. And we really were open. I don't know if you remember that broadcast. We were open and honest about how that felt. We were open and honest about how our families felt. One of the things somebody told me is when we talked about, hey, look, every time I come back with a meeting there's a business meeting or a meeting with the elders, almost always my wife's first question is, do we have to move?
Yes.
And the common member has no way, they don't understand that. No. And when you do move, and you've moved and I've moved, if things have worked right, that's a painful process because you're leaving. It's not even just friends; you're leaving family. That's right. One of the things I've always emphasized is we're a family. We're a family. But then when I leave to go somewhere else, I'm leaving my family behind. Mm. This last move, we love where we're at, but it was particularly hard because we'd been there 11 years, and the people in Memphis and Collierville, they were our family. I mean, to this day, they're our family. But it was a very painful thing when we left them. And the circumstances were painful enough. But leaving them and leaving your family behind, it was like a divorce. Mm-hmm. And we got no visitation rights, And those are the kind of things that we expose in this podcast. I don't know what to call it, by the way. Broadcast, podcast, live video. It's so many different terms you could use. Those are the things we try to talk openly about. I would tell you, when we did this, we both had a conversation. In fact, I had a conversation with elders. I was doing some things individually. I think you saw on my own page, which was from live videos where I was talking about leadership and all that. And the reason for that at the time, by the way, was we were going through the process of studying about elders. And so when I would talk about elders and I was talking about leadership, it was really intended for the members here to think in those lines for our own process of appointing elders. But we had a conversation. I had a conversation with the elders and said, look, there may be things that I say that you wonder about. You need to understand I'm very happy, but I'm going to be very open and honest about this. And there may be some times where I reveal things like about depression, about other things that you may take personally if you're not careful. It's not about you. This is about really exposing the emotions and the mental struggle of preaching to the congregation, to not our congregation, but to the church universal, almost, to this audience. it's amazing how many places Phil and I go and somebody goes, hey, thanks for this or thanks for that. And they're people that weren't watching live. That's one thing I don't look into the whole thing as much as Phil does. The most we've had is maybe 15 people watch live. And if you're not careful, you think that. But some of those videos have been watched a lot of times later on. So we live in a great time where you can do that. Like you do this, even this video, it's a fantastic thing to be able to do that. And so we're really blessed to have that opportunity.
Well, let me talk to you a little bit about the weakness that men traditionally have with sharing feelings, sharing experiences, sharing emotions.
Yeah.
You don't come across as particularly inhibited as far as that sort of thing goes, but all men struggle with this, I think. And providing an outlet, even where you can just kind of watch somebody else's exchange, is useful. And to a certain degree, you're able to interact in a live setting, at least, sending questions in and that sort of thing. Being able to participate in somebody else's struggles. And maybe even share a little bit of your own struggles. That's something that we get kind of drag kicking and screaming into. Getting married helps a lot with this because they're much better at this than we are.
Yeah.
And so we kind of get forced into sharing. But it really is a healthy thing for us.
Real men don't cry, right?
Right.
That's what we're told. There's real men don't cry. They don't eat quiche. They don't use zip codes. Those kind of things. I mean, it's kind of the old jokes. Well. One of the things you understand is the hardest part of my life when I was 16 and my dad was killed in a car accident. And my dad was my best friend. And that's obviously a tragic thing, no warning. So my emotional kind of breakthrough, initially I did not cry about that for a while. I was the man of the house now. I remember very much so wanting to lead singing at my dad's funeral. My mom would not let me. And I promised her I could do that without crying, and I proved that by sitting through the whole funeral service and not crying, right? Which is, by the way, very immature. But I was 16 years old, and there were some dark days after that. It was actually the study of Job my senior year of high school in my high school English class that probably put me more in touch with the ability to express feelings. One of the amazing things about Job is how Job can feel open and honest to say to God, I don't like you. Like, I am angry. I am bitter. I'm demanding you give me an explanation. And one of the things that stood out to me is it says in all this, Job did not sin. And so it started to understand that emotions are not only okay, they're actually good. And I was always that guy, I had no problem laughing, but the other emotions I didn't share. So as a preacher, I think we carry that over. And I just, if my job is, I'm very much trying to be a connector, to go back to what we talked about earlier. If my job is to connect to people, I can't be this kind of wound up, pre-programmed robot that never shows emotion, never cries, never laughs, never gets anxious, never gets upset. And in addition to those kind of core emotions of even loneliness, being open and honest about your loneliness that you feel. Even those core emotions, if you don't share those, then you fail to have a connection. The other side of that also is just the honesty of, hey, I am not perfect. I've messed up a lot. I've sinned in some of the worst ways. I'm a picture of God's grace. I think both of those things together, I have, because of a lot of things in my life, just kind of learned to be open about. And, but these stories of the pastors, use the world's term loosely there, killing themselves, really bothered me and really pulled back the cover on the whole depression issue. I don't know about you, but there's been times in my life, in my work, specifically because of my work, where I know I've been depressed, where I know because of what has been said, or maybe what has happened, or it could be silly things. I don't know if you've had this, but when the attendance goes down or the giving goes down, like I take that personally. One of the things that I've tried to tell people is like the preacher takes everything personally, like everything personally. If this 1 week I have 150, yay, that's a victory. 115, man, what did I do? How did I change that? Why did I cause that? So that causes a lot of emotions, and I think it's sad that here were these guys. I don't agree with their doctrine, but they got so beaten down in this work that they killed themselves. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to that, I mean, yeah, it'd be easier to just kind of say, hey, we're not going to talk about this. Guys don't cry. Guys don't have emotions. But that's how that happened, right? That's
right.
That's how that. So we've got to train, I think, even brethren, that it's okay. I think that's one of the problems with our churches, by the way. I don't think we cry enough together. We talk about weeping with those who weep. When's the last time the whole church cried? Like, really cried over something? It's been about 3 months ago. One of our members, one of their family members was found deceased, and he was young. And it was tough. And on Wednesday night after class, some of their family came for just that portion, and we just had a series of prayers. It was a very emotional thing, and that's what the church is supposed to be about. So, I guess that's a long answer to say, yeah, I don't have problems sharing those. I think you have to share those emotions. I don't know if I even answered your question, but and this broadcast has allowed that. We can share our joys, share our sorrows, share all that. And I think one of the things I came to a conclusion a long time ago was, we talk about shepherding. Who shepherds shepherds? Like, who shepherds the elders? Who shepherds the evangelist? Especially in models where churches are operating more of this corporate CEO, board of directors over an employee kind of structure versus shepherding. Who shepherds the local preacher? If he's just an employee, a hired hand, he's not viewed as part of the family. Who shepherds him?
Right.
When he's discouraged, where does he go? So the question becomes, and I think this is tough, and we have a lot of guys who talk to us privately. I think there's a lot of guys that are in a lot of churches who are depressed because of their work, but they can't talk to anybody there.
Yeah.
How do they do that? So they reach out to us, and we're glad to provide that.
If you want to stop listening at this point and go your way, I hope you've found the message instructive, inspiring, and most of all, faithful to God's Word. Please don't forget to like, rate, share, subscribe, and follow. But if you stick around for a few more minutes, I would like to share with you a way to amuse yourself in a wholesome manner while waiting here in Satan's world, and perhaps pick up a spiritual point or two in the process. This is what I've been playing.
In our segment entitled What We've Been Playing, I thought we would deviate a little bit from the norm because I am in the heart of Alabama Crimson Tide territory talking to the world's largest Tennessee Volunteer fan.
Is that a size joke?
I knew you were going to go there. I knew you were going to go there. That was not a size joke.
Okay.
Anyway,
okay.
you had that ready to go.
I did.
But
I got my helmet right here.
Show your helmet.
I got my helmet right here.
For those who are watching the YouTube are witnessing history here, we got some Tennessee propaganda going on here.
That's right.
In an unusual setting. I don't know if you follow college football very much these days, but the University of Tennessee is falling on a bit of hard times.
We're terrible.
I did not use that word.
I'm a fan. We're terrible. We're horrible. And it's just going to get worse this year, I'm afraid, because we showed some life. And, it was hopeful last week. Alabama, not a better, but we covered the spread against Alabama. That doesn't happen very often. And we might have been even closer, but Jerry Garantano is terrible. He called a quarterback sneak when he should have handed the ball off, and we'd have been within one touch. No, we're terrible. And he's wide, and he's going to play this week. So I'm very upset. And when I moved here, by the way, I told you this. They asked me, who do you declare for? It's this Alabama-Auburn garbage in Alabama. Mm-hmm. And I declared for Tennessee. And now the good news of that is Tennessee played Auburn last year at Auburn. I was given tickets, and we won.
All right.
So there was a high point. It has been, I don't know, it's been over 4,700 days since Alabama has lost to Tennessee. We're terrible. And it's really, I will say this about the people here. They're not as obnoxious as you would think they would be. But I do tell them, I'm like, in Alabama, it's called Hate Week. Mm-hmm. I don't know why you still hate us. We're not worth hating. We're terrible. That's just how it is. But we're going to try to make some applications for this. And let me transition this way. I saw a meme last week that said, ladies, if you want to find a husband worth marrying, marry a UT fan because they're loyal through the worst of times.
There you go.
And so that's me. My wife is blessed. So before somebody comments, here's actually the truth. I grew up an Alabama fan. Nobody knows this. Well, some people do. It's under the influence of Gary Patton, who was the preacher. My dad used to tell Gary Patton if he could teach me to love Jesus as much as he taught me to love Sweet Tea and Bear Bryant, that I'd be okay. And I do think Gary did that. And I've been with Gary since I've converted to a better team. I say that, we're terrible. But in fact, that's what UT stands for, is University of Terrible at this point. But about the time I got married, my wife was a UT fan. I had kind of drifted away from Alabama as I got older. I am a Tennessee boy. I have a coffee cup over there with a TriStar on it. I wear TriStar socks all the time. I got TriStar flag in my house. I mean, I'm a Tennessee guy living in Alabama. In fact, when I moved to Memphis, people told me to move across the line to Mississippi because it's cheaper to live over there. Housing was cheaper. And I could not put a Mississippi license plate on the back of my car because I'm a Tennessee guy. I really have been a Tennessee fan, diehard. I've always kind of followed them a little bit, but diehard for about 23 years. Our son is named after Peyton Manning, so we are locked in, not allowed to change. And so we're big-time fans, but it's been rough. We've not had a good 11 years.
Well, I'm a Texas A&M fan in the same general area of the world. We're strangers in a strange land.
Yeah, and what's great about you being an AM fan is at least I don't have to explain Johnny football. So,
Yes.
So
we all have our burdens.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm not a big gamer. We talked about this. I don't play a lot of games. I'm so busy with family stuff. If we didn't talk about Tennessee football, we'd have to talk about soccer because that's where I'm at all the time with my daughter. Is at the soccer fields, and I do play some video games, but they're usually football video games, which brings us back to Tennessee. So I do think, and by the way, I'm a Tennessee Titans fan, which means we're terrible again. So I do think there's one of the things I remember about sports is sports does not build your character; it reveals your character. Mm-hmm. It's a quote that I read one time, and I do think that one of the things that I hope people appreciate about my fandom is I'm going to be loyal no matter what. I'm going to be a Tennessee fan. I don't care how many times we lose to Alabama. I'm not rooting for Alabama. I'm a Tennessee fan, and that loyalty to a bad team, I think, translates to faithfulness to other things as well. I'm reminded of, and I know this seems like a stretch, but if you can't be faithful in little, how can you be faithful in much? And I think there's something to be said for loyalty, not just to a team, but to a man's family, to his wife, to his job, to all kinds of things, to his community. By the way, I'm very loyal to my community of Alabamians and to my church full of Alabamians. I can't even wear an orange tie with a blue sport coat anymore because that's viewed as being for Auburn. So I've had to even change those kind of things. But I do appreciate them. But this is who I am at this point. It's literally part of my DNA at this point.
Well, instead of talking about a bad team, or as you are fond of saying today, a terrible team.
Terrible.
Maybe
almost Charles Barkley, like terrible.
Maybe the application for us as Christians might be a team that's going through a rough time, a team that seems outmatched, a team that is taking its lumps, as it were.
Well, yeah, and truthfully, people forget that before Alabama won these last, I think, 11 or 12 years, Tennessee beat them for like 10 years in a row. This has been a series, if we use them, that
you went like
back
15 minutes without mentioning that. That's
It's just like I tell people, y'all give me a hard time about our coaches, but y'all forget Dubose, Price, Francione, Shula. You did not skip from Bear Bryant to Gene Stallings to Nick Saban, and so every team has adversity.
That's right.
Every team, and that not just football teams, every home, every workplace environment, every church is going to have adversity. And I think to kind of get more in depth, I think the home is a better place for that. Maybe, in the home, in our culture, what is really common is when it gets really tough, somebody walks away and decides that they want to go somewhere else.
Right.
They don't want to go through the adversity anymore. And I think that's a bad quality to have. And just you don't have to be a UT fan to be a loyal person. Let me say that. But But again, loyalty is seen in these kind of things. And so, for instance, as a husband, when I took my vow, for better or for worse, richer or poor, and all that, I mean, I intend to hold that. And I intend to do that. And I'm not going to walk away just because times get tough. I think when it comes to church problems, sometimes it's a little even harder to maybe maintain because we didn't take a vow. And by the way, I think one of the things that's always bothered me, first off, the preacher really can't walk away from churches during church problems unless he's A, hired, or B, fired. Like,
Right.
Unless he has somewhere to go to or he's been told he's the problem. So a lot of issues maybe we're in the middle of sometimes, and we stay in those issues, especially the public ones. I don't know about you, but I do get frustrated when I see members that just decide it's too much and they go 5 miles down the road to another church rather than deal with the problems. And I don't see a sense of loyalty to what I just talked about earlier in the moving and depression preacher of the sense that that's your family.
Well, the presumption is you're moving to a place that does not have problems.
Right.
Which you find out before too long is not the case.
Right.
And now you have a new, and like you said before, it's about loyalty.
Yeah.
And don't we see this in every aspect of human culture these days? It's all about me. It's all about what I can get, what I want. If I'm not getting what I want out of this relationship, then I'll leave this relationship and find something else. And Jesus requires us to do better than that.
Yeah.
And if we can't learn it in our marriage, or if we can't learn it in our community, or in even the local church, how can we possibly maintain our faith in difficult circomstances? Because we're, as I say all the time on the podcast, we're living in Satan's world here.
Sure.
Satan is dominating the overwhelming majority of the people who are coming in contact with. You think you can get by without any kind of adversity? You're kidding yourself. Delusional, or extraordinarily lucky in the short term, and it will catch up with you. And then what are you going to do? Well, this isn't working out for me. Well, we have to find a way to be loyal.
Right.
Who are we really? I am a husband of Tracy. I am the parent of these two great girls. I am a preacher of the gospel. I am a Christian.
Right.
And when we define ourselves that way, even as a Tennessee fan, this is what I am. And maybe it's not working out so great right now.
Sure.
And maybe it'll be worse tomorrow. But this is who I am, and this is how I define myself.
Yeah, here's a little secret, though. There's been times in my life as the husband of Duane that it wasn't working out so great. Like, it's not public, but there's, we've been married for over 21 years. There's been rocky patches. There's been times, most of them my fault, by the way, I want to make that clear. But there's been times where that's been tough. There's been times as a parent that, whether it's my child's fault or whether it's my fault for not being just a perfect parent, there's been rocky patches. I don't walk away from that because there's been rocky patches. There's obviously been time in my work as a preacher that there's been rocky patches. A lot of them directly tied to me, not all of them, but a lot of them. You don't walk away from that, and you try to work those things out. And that's something I've always done. And I can tell you that I personally have more than once got up in front of a congregation as a preacher and said, I'm part of this problem. I want to publicly confess I'm part of this problem, but I'm sticking this out. This is my family. I'm staying. You don't walk away from that. And you mentioned there's no perfect churches, and they think they're going to one. Somebody told me one time, there's no perfect churches. If you find one, you can't go there because you will mess it up.
That's right.
And that's the idea. And so loyalty sticks through all of that. Loyalty says, this is who I am, no matter what. And I got to tell you, that's one of the things we try to raise our kids to be, is loyal to Jesus no matter what. I give my son a hard time. He is, again, named him after Peyton Manning. If you want to make sure your child never departs from rooting from a team, name him from the most famous player of his lifetime that ever went to school there. But we're Preds fans, and he's a Preds fan. We're Titans fans. He's a Titans fan. Where that gets a little sideways is, and I'm a Celtics fan from way back in the Larry Bird days, and my son is a Celtics fan. Where that gets sideways is baseball, and I am a Braves fan, and the only thing worse than being a Braves fan, or being a Tennessee fan, may be being a Braves fan in my lifetime. I mean, we've had one little slice of, and this year we thought we were all good, and the Cardinals scored 10 runs on us in one inning, so it's awful.
I'm an Astros fan. So
yeah, well, welcome to my world. Yeah. My son roots for the Braves some, but he is a self-declared Yankees fan.
Oh, really?
And so I failed as a parent in that sense.
Yeah.
He is loyal to the wrong. In fact, they're the evil empire, right? We all hate the Yankees. They're like the Patriots of baseball.
I think we're all in agreement.
Yes. But he's loyal to them. I've tried to cut up the shirts that have Yankees emblems on them and so forth unashamedly, but he's loyal. And again, the whole point of that is there's some things in life that my son can choose, like baseball teams, to be different than. I hope that my lessons of loyalty to him have really stuck with the Lord and with the Lord's church, and when he becomes a husband with his wife. I hope that he sees in my actions, not just the things that I've taught him, but in the things, and my girls as well, but he's the older one that's nearer this point of life. I hope that he sees the need for loyalty in his life as well. And so that's one of the things when I didn't declare for Auburn, Alabama, that I thought was also important is, hey, this is who I am. Who would I be if I came and go, okay, I'm an Alabama fan now. That's not who I am. Neither am I a hired gun that can change what he teaches or preaches based on who offers him a bigger paycheck. That's not how loyalty works.
No.
But loyalty is missing in our culture. Faithfulness, that's another definition of faithfulness, the overlooked definition of faithfulness, that trustworthy nature, that loyalty. We need more of that. So, back to that meme, if you want a man that's trustworthy and loyal, find a Tennessee fan, because if he can hang on to them, he can be loyal to anybody.
Well, you got to keep the faith.
That's right.
That's what being faithful is, ultimately, is being full of faith. And we have enough faith in us as Christians in Jesus to know that the difficulties, the hardships, the opposition that we're facing right now is short term.
Yeah.
It can last 100 years and it's still short term.
Correct.
That we are working through this. God is in control of these things.
Yeah.
And we're being loyal to him because we've entrusted him with our souls, and we believe this is going to work out.
And he at least is a worthy object of our loyalty. I'm that forever, and especially in Tennessee football, I'm that forever optimist. Like all my friends, one of our elders is a big Tennessee fan. He's from just outside of Knoxville in Oak Ridge. And he will tell me every week, Jeremy Pruitt is not the guy. He is not the guy. And I'm going, no, it's just 16 games in. You don't know that. You got to be patient. Jeremy Pruitt's the guy. Like I look at every little thing. Like this whole country's up in alarms because he grabbed Garantano's face mask. I'm like, look, he got on to him. That's what we need. This is the guy. Which, by the way, I had no problem with that. My son probably got a lot worse with his coaches in high school, and that's a whole other subject about the sissification of America. But anyway, to get back to this point, I don't know that Pruitt's the guy. I do know Jesus is the guy. I do know that Jesus is worthy of my trust and my faith and my loyalty. I do know that he will never let me down. I do know that his church, his team, is worthy of all my affection and admiration and service and participation in. I know that. That is without a doubt. And so while you could be curious of whether Tennessee's worth this in my life or all that other stuff, there's no doubt. And by the way, my wife and my kids are the same way. My wife is worthy of my admiration and my love and my affection and all the things that I give her. She has never showed me any reason not to be that. In fact, she showed me many times that I should.
Right.
So in life, you find those things that are worthy of that loyalty, and you give them that loyalty.
That's right.
Thank you for listening to the Citizen of Heaven podcast. If you profited from your time here, I have a few requests of you. Please pray for me and for this work. We need more citizens of heaven, and our prayer is that we be part of achieving this objective. Please subscribe to this podcast and give a good rating on iTunes and other sites that allow you to do such things, and spread the word to your friends. Please follow my work through my website, www.halhammonds.com. There you'll find links to articles, videos, and books of mine. Seek me out on social media. You can find me on Instagram, YouTube, and especially Facebook. Look for me and for my pages, The Final Word, The Preacher, 20 Pages a Week, and Citizen of Heaven. Until next time, be strong and courageous, fight the good fight of faith, and do all things in the name of the Lord Jesus. This is Hal Hammonds, the Citizen of Heaven, signing off.